In most cases, lovers' quarrels do indeed find resolution through a simple apology and a willingness to work things out. However, there are rare instances where conflicts escalate to extreme and tragic outcomes. One such case is that of Catherine Knight, where the resolution took a terrifying turn, leading to murder and mutilation.
She was just evil.
She could switch on and off so quickly.
It was just that explosive anger which would come out to the extreme.
In addition to stabbing her boyfriend John Charles Thomas Price at least 37 times on February 29, 2000, this Australian butcher worker also cut, cooked, and got ready to feed him to his own kids. The horrifying act of killing was not an isolated incident.
I went out and cut his dog's throat.
Was the dog dead?
It was a clean cut, they said.
Deep-rooted in her story are instances of violence and sexual abuse, serving as harbingers of the gruesome bloodshed that would eventually unfold. These early signs paint a chilling picture of the troubled path that led to the tragic events that would later define her life. Catherine Mary Knight's life was marked by a series of challenging and traumatic events. Born on October 24, 1955, in Tenterfield, Australia, she entered the world as a result of a scandalous affair between her mother, Barbara Rogan, and her father, Ken Knight.
I couldn't believe it, I was horrified.
She took a sort of malevolent pleasure in death.
This affair caused a stir in their small, conservative town, as Rogan was already married and a mother of 4 boys. Knight's chaotic upbringing continued as her father, a very violent alcoholic, subjected her mother to repeated rape. Tragically, Knight also experienced sexual assault by multiple family members until the age of 11. These early experiences left a lasting impact on her life.
This is one of the most distressing and disturbing murders ever committed in this country. In fact, this horrendous slaughter is notorious around the world, not just for its gruesome brutality, but because it was committed by a rare creature, a female psychopath. To even try to make sense of how Catherine Knight could commit such a terrible act, we need to understand where she came from and where she was always destined to go.
In school, Knight gained a reputation as a bully, terrorizing smaller children. She left school at the age of 15 without acquiring basic reading and writing skills, instead opting to work at a clothing factory. At the age of 16, Knight found employment at a slaughterhouse, which she considered her dream job. She enjoyed it so much that she even hung her first set of butcher's knives over her bed, perhaps as a display of her fascination with the macabre. As time went on, Knight's disturbing fascination with violence would manifest itself.
Trial workers, they were itinerant, they moved around a lot. They grew up in abusive families, and they were abusive families. It was all they knew.
These introductory details provide a glimpse into the difficult and troubled life of Catherine Mary Knight, foreshadowing the dark path she would eventually take. In the butcher shop where Knight worked, she crossed paths with David Kellett, a man who shared similarities with an alcoholic father, including a penchant for engaging in fistfights. Knight, accustomed to witnessing such violence, caught her new partner off guard when she unexpectedly participated in one of his drunken brawls. After some time, he came to a realization that Knight possessed a formidable prowess, not limited to her physical strength alone. It became evident that she had a remarkable ability to assert her dominance over him. In no time, he found himself being completely overwhelmed by her presence and power. In 1974, despite her mother's warnings about her daughter's temper and the fact that he was heavily intoxicated, she somehow managed to convince him to marry her. It seems that her mother had concerns about Knight, believing that she had a screw loose somewhere. On their wedding night, Knight and Kellett shared an intimate and passionate connection, consummating their marriage 3 times. However, as Knight's desire for a 4th round persisted, she became frustrated with her husband's exhaustion. In a moment of escalating tension, Knight's emotions overwhelmed her, leading her to make a rash and dangerous decision. She impulsively attempted to strangle her husband, driven by a combination of disappointment and anger. This sudden turn of events marked a dark and troubling twist in their relationship.
Moved through a lot of schools. She was very close to her sister Joy, but she didn't have a lot of close friends.
Kellett awoke with a start, his instincts kicking in as he fought off Knight's unexpected attack. Despite the shocking revelation that she had attempted to end his life just one day into their marriage, the couple managed to persevere. Surprisingly, their union endured for another 10 years, but it was far from perfect. Kellett's infidelity was a recurring issue in his relationship with Knight. On one occasion, he even abandoned his wife and their 2 daughters abruptly, leaving them in the middle of the night. The discovery of one of Kellett's affairs pushed Knight to extreme measures. She shockingly placed their 2-month-old infant on the local train tracks, just moments before a train was scheduled to arrive. Fortunately, the train did not come and the infant was spared from harm. Additionally, Knight resorted to wielding a stolen axe, threatening several individuals as a desperate expression of her anger and frustration. She was also diagnosed with postnatal depression after witnesses saw her violently pushing and swinging her second child in a stroller down a busy street. She spent a few months in a psychiatric hospital. She confides in nurses about her intention to kill a mechanic who had fixed Kellett's car, as she believed it enabled him to leave her. Despite this threatening statement, Kellett chose to reconcile with Knight once she was released from the hospital. Unfortunately, their reunion was short-lived, and Knight experienced a period of intense distress after Kellett ultimately decided to end the relationship. In 1986, following her breakup with Kellett, Catherine Knight swiftly became involved in a whirlwind romance with David Saunders, who was a local miner. In just a few months, Saunders made the decision to move in with Knight and her 2 daughters. It's worth noting that he still maintained his own apartment, which became a source of jealousy and suspicion for Knight. As with her past relationships, this new dynamic soon turned toxic and violent. She once showed him what she was capable of by slitting the throat of his 2-month-old dingo puppy in front of him. Despite the challenges they faced, they managed to stay together and even welcomed a daughter into their lives a year later. However, their relationship took a drastic turn when Saunders decided to leave Knight shortly after the birth. This decision came after Knight's alarming attempt to harm him with a pair of scissors. The incident marked a turning point in their relationship, leading to their eventual separation. In her journey, she crossed paths with a man named John Chillingworth. Together, they shared 3 years of their lives and even had a child named Eric, Knight's first son. Although there were no reports of any violent incidents during their time together, their relationship eventually came to an end.
By age 3 or 4, something would already have died within Catherine. She knew no one was going to come to make things better, so she had to learn to fight or to hide. Obviously, very young children can't fight back, so when they're under severe threat, some will dissociate. This is more or less like a circuit tripping. Catherine was overwhelmed and she mentally disconnected. But while she was in that state, she was missing out on developing the range of emotions that make us human. Emotions like love, happiness, joy, and empathy.
When Chillingworth discovered that Knight was having an affair with another man named John Charles Thomas Price. In the beginning, Catherine Knight and John Price's relationship seemed to be free of complications. Despite Price having 2 older children who lived with him, they appeared to like Knight, creating a harmonious family dynamic. Additionally, Price's stable income as a miner ensured that Knight was financially controllable. As a result, they decided to take their relationship to the next level and moved in together in 1995. During this time, their relationship appeared to be progressing smoothly and without any major issues. When she proposed the idea of getting married to him and he declined, her reaction took a violent turn. Knight framed Price for stealing things from his company and got him fired. Though he initially kicked her out, a few months later they started seeing each other again. But this time he wouldn't allow her to move back in. That's when their friends and neighbors said Knight's violence started to get worse. In February of 2000, a disturbing incident occurred involving John Charles Thomas Price and Catherine Knight. Their argument escalated to the point where Knight attempted to stab Price in the chest. As a result, Price took legal action and obtained a restraining order against Knight in order to protect his children from any potential harm. The situation took a chilling turn when Price expressed his concerns about his own safety to his co-workers. He confided in them, stating that if he were ever to go missing, it would be because Knight had killed him.
I remember one of her classmates telling me that she saw Catherine turn on her sister Joy. It was an argument about whose turn it was to ride the bicycle home. Now, girls, sisters in that situation might pinch or pull hair or slap each other or shout and cry.
This statement foreshadowed an unsettling fate that would later unfold. On February 29, 2000, John Charles Thomas Price returned home from work and proceeded with his usual routine of checking in with the neighbors before retiring to bed at 11 p.m. Shortly after, Knight arrived home, prepared dinner for herself, watched TV, took a shower, and then went upstairs. She woke Price, the two had sex, and he went back to bed. In a shocking turn of events, Catherine Knight resorted to unspeakable violence by grabbing a butcher knife, which she had conveniently kept near her bed. With this weapon in hand, she ruthlessly stabbed her victim, Price, a staggering 37 times. Although he managed to awaken during the horrifying assault, his efforts to defend himself were tragically in vain. He died from his wounds, and Knight skinned him, brought his body downstairs, and hung it from the living room butcher hook. She then chopped off his head and cooked the portions of his body in a casserole with gravy, potatoes, pumpkin, beets, zucchini, cabbage, and squash. Then she took a lot of pills, passed out, and lay next to Price's decapitated and disfigured corpse. The following morning, Price's concerned co-workers took his warning seriously and promptly contacted the police when he failed to appear for his shift. Swiftly responding to the call, the police arrived at the scene to discover the horrifying aftermath of Catherine Knight's heinous crime. They quickly apprehended Knight, who was found in a comatose state. As she regained consciousness, Knight professed to having no recollection of the events that unfolded the previous night, leaving investigators perplexed and intrigued by the enigma surrounding the crime. In the kitchen, authorities made a chilling discovery. Price's head was found boiling in a pot of vegetables on the stove. As they further investigated the scene, their horror deepened. On the table, 2 full plates were placed, meticulously labeled with names. It was then that the police realized the unimaginable truth. Knight had intended to serve John Price's dismembered body parts to his own children. This disturbing revelation sent shockwaves through the investigators, emphasizing the heinous nature of the crime. Despite Catherine Knight's claims of having no recollection of the night John Charles Thomas Price died,
Before the train came, it was a touch-and-go thing, I believe.
And then in the meantime, she left the line and went up to a house just up the road and raced into the backyard of it and grabbed the axe.
she was swiftly charged with his murder. It is worth noting that the authorities must have had compelling evidence or witnesses that led them to pursue charges against her. While it is important to consider the presumption of innocence until proven guilty, the immediate charge suggests that the authorities found something substantial enough to warrant such action. In October of 2001, the trial of the individual in question commenced, but it didn't progress significantly. For reasons that are still unclear, the defendant, Knight, changed her plea to guilty, and as a result, the judge adjourned the case without any testimony being presented. In a groundbreaking moment, she was accompanied to prison on that fateful day, while the judge pronounced the solemn decree that her files were to be forever stamped with the words, "Never to be released." This landmark ruling marked a significant milestone in Australian history, as it was the first instance where a woman was handed a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Throughout the present time, Knight remained steadfast in her claim of innocence and adamantly refused to acknowledge any culpability for her actions. Despite the evidence presented against her, she persists in maintaining her innocence. Catherine Knight, a notorious criminal, has made attempts to appeal her sentence in the past, but was quickly denied. Currently, she's serving her life sentence at Silverwater Women's Correctional Center. Despite her appeals, the legal system has upheld her sentence, indicating the severity of her crimes and the importance of holding her accountable for her actions. What do you think about this case? Share your comments in the section below.